Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am here in Accra post the Pa Gya Literary Festival, which was an exciting weekend here hosted by the Writers Project Ghana. It took place at the Goethe Institute, lots of different sponsors, which you'll see in the show notes, just kind of get information. I'm excited. This is in the after. We've gone past our weekend and I've been able to catch up with a wonderful novelist, journalist, film critic, curator, speaker, and lecturer of African literature and arts. He's at the Leiden University in the Netherlands. He's written several novels, including The Emperor's Son, in 2024, which is his latest novel, a novel about Emperor Samori Touré, The Witness, which is in 2011, Bound to Secrecy, 2007, The Kingdom of Sebah in 2003, Land of My Fathers, which I think was your first novel.
My first, yes.
In 1999, and the memoir, Unprecedented Love, in 2021. He has curated several anthologies, including the bestselling Black Afro-European Literature in the Netherlands and Belgium. His work, which has been translated into many languages, deals with themes such as immigration, belonging, love, the history of slavery, colonialism, and the African resistance to it, and the mysteries of existence as well. Vamba Sherif.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Florence.
Yes, I'm so happy we were able to sit down. So in preparation for the festival, I went through all of the different participants, and your bio particularly stood out to me because of the themes, as I just mentioned, and just your story is intriguing. And so let's get started with my first question, which is typically, where are you from?
Yes.
Where are you local?
Yes.
And what is your craft?
Thank you so much. Yes, I was born in northern Liberia. What is special about that area of Liberia or West Africa is that it's a border town. So my city of birth, Colahon, borders with Guinea and Sierra Leone. The beautiful thing about that, being born in a border town, is that you learn to speak different languages, because I speak the language of Guinea, that is Mande or Madingo, and I speak the languages of Sierra Leone, and that's Mende and Gisi, and you learn to meet many people, many different people, which gives you a kind of broad perspective on life, So I learned to, from the very beginning, to look at life from different perspectives, So, and that taught me to open up, to be optimistic about life, because one's perspective is not the only perspective, That's what taught me from early on, living in Colahon, northern Liberia. And as you know, my country, Liberia, is very unique in the history of Africa. A country founded by African Americans in the 19th century, who, after gaining freedom and longing for Africa, that dream continent, decided to act on that dream, to say, all right, we've experienced slavery and America is not our home. We need to go back where we came from and to seek liberty there. So the name Liberia is not strange to that reality, because actually fleeing slavery and seeking freedom in Africa, and that's why my country is called Liberia. And that's what makes it so unique in the history of Africa. So that's the country that gave birth to me. Yes, and that's what I try to reflect in my first novel. It's actually a very optimistic novel. Land of My Fathers is a novel of friendship, as I hope and dream that Liberia would be, a friendship between an African American born into slavery, gained his freedom and decided to move to Liberia to reunite with his beloved Charlotte. And in Liberia meets this remarkable African with whom he befriended and who became his brother. So It's a story of two people meeting, two people who were black but who came from very different backgrounds. One born and bred in the U.S. With his Christian values, and one who worshipped the gods and but decided that this is a man in whom I recognize myself, who understands me, who is my best friend. And so it's a very optimistic take on Liberia. And it came because, circumstances form us as novelists, as people. So the war in Liberia, the civil war in Liberia formed me and made me into the writer I am today. It was out of despair, out of, the urge to explain Liberia to myself, to give a sense of direction to the country that I love so much, that I decided to create these two fictional characters who were inspired by real people. My main character, Edward Richard, is actually inspired by Edward Blything, the father of Pan-Africanism. And Harley, my fictional character, is inspired by a real historical character who lived centuries ago in Liberia. And what is unique about his life, and I try to recreate or reenact in my novel, is that there was a story of a man who, when his people were threatened by war, there was the oracle had said that there will come a war that would destroy the entire country, his people, and they will make them slaves and everything. But there was one way to avoid that war, and that was if someone came forward and gave himself to the gods to avert that war. And he became that person.
Oh.
Yes, this messianic character, who loved his people so much that he was willing to die to save his people. So these are the two people, Edward and Harley, whose story I try to tell in Land of My Fathers. So you see how involved I am with Liberia, how the forces and that create this modern Liberia formed me as a writer. And I'm grateful that I was able to express and give form to these dreams and hopes like I did and continue to do in my work.
And so, where are you local?
Yes, that's a question I've struggled with for a long time, a very long time. I always felt, even within my family, like an outsider. I did things that did not conform to the expectations. I mean, I was very curious. I did things that at hindsight sounds very shocking. I was not. I wasn't. I don't know. I mean, I sounded very, naive if you look at me. Very innocent as an adult, when I look at myself as a child, I say, oh my God, that I did those things, Yeah, I remember, all right, I came from this very conservative family, which meant that there were some things that we couldn't do at all. And me being the grandchild of one of the greatest scholars of Liberia, so I had certain obligations, there were certain expectations from me. But I remember why I did that, I cannot for the life of me imagine now. But I remember, wearing this mask. In West African societies, a mask is not just it's just not just art. It has something symbolic. It has very powerful meanings. But I remember, carving a very crude mask and wearing it, trying to pretend I was this mask, this masquerade or something, and coming home. And I remember my grandmother was preparing some food, and I stood before her with this mask on. She was so shocked that she just began to wail and scream. And I could not believe that, right now, as an adult, why? What got into me to do this, Yes. So that sense of being different and doing things my way, has always formed me. So in that sense, I felt I did not entirely belong, when in fact I was really loved. I had the fortune of being loved with my grandmother, two women who brought me up, my mother and my grandmother, because I lost my father age 4, so two remarkable women. I mean, my grandmother was a very successful trader or businesswoman, as we say in Liberia, and she taught her daughter, to become even a more successful businesswoman. So my mother was very wealthy. Business, yes, and very influential, and also very generous. I mean, gave away. There are so many people in Liberia, you know, who went to school thanks to my mother. And this is why the women of my novels are very independent, very fierce, very, determined, and they choose their men. They do things. Yes. And so it's a reflection of my own reality, seeing this women. And so the people are reading, for example, in the West, they have this idea of African women, as being, these are all patriarchal societies. I said, no, not mine. Not my society was not patriarchal. It was very, matriarchal, very dominant women. My grandmother, my mother. So there was part of me that belonged to that Liberia and that I still long for. And at early age, I moved to Kuwait, and aspects of Kuwaiti life, I embrace inculcated in my way of life. But I fled Kuwait because of war, the first Gulf War. Very young, I think it was like 16.
Oh, wow. Yeah, very young. So what age did you go to Kuwait?
10, 11.
Oh, wow.
Yes, very young. Yes, through the help of my brother who was educated in Egypt. So he made that by going possible, So he had access and he tried to help me. And because I was the last born,
Oh, okay.
so they took over responsibility over me. I mean, they said, I didn't lose my father. I remember, very beautiful what he said, we are now your father. This is my brother saying this to me, and it's very beautiful. So I've been searching for this, sense of locality, sense of belonging. And for years, I didn't have that in Holland. No. I never felt.
So tell us, so you just were in Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
So you went there, you fled due to the war. So between Kuwait and the Netherlands,
Yes,
you had a whole other local.
Oh, yes. Kuwait was good because I had access to books, which was my way of explaining the world to myself, making sense of the world. And literature, I believe, truly is affirmation of our humanity. So that's why I read a Japanese novel and I see myself in the character, and the Japanese writer or reader reads African novels and recognize himself or herself in the work. So reading was myself. I mean, my way of expressing myself and making sense of the world. So leaving Kuwait as a refugee, because we actually fled Kuwait, it was a terrible experience. We had to bribe smugglers. People smuggled people at that time because all the borders were closed. So you had to be smuggled through Iraq. Just a terrible, terrible experience for us. I mean, travel all night in a bus and arrived at the border with Jordan. And and took a taxi to bring us to another bus to bring us to Amman. But we did not reach our destination because we had dumped. There was a refugee camp in the no man's land between Jordan and Iraq. That's where we were dumped. That's the most horrible experience I've ever had in my life. Something I have difficulties talking about. It's just horrible. So we stayed some time and then moved to Amman, and it was a very expensive city. So we decided to move to Syria because we knew people in Syria. They were Liberians in Syria, yes, students. So we stayed in Syria for 2 years. I wrote a short story about a remarkable friendship that we had with a Syrian soldier who had welcomed us to his village. But when we went to visit him for a few days, he had to go because he was giving orders, to do something. So he left a note, instructions to his family. Oh, these people are coming. they are my friends, receive them. And it's just show the hospitality of people, so strangers, people who didn't know us and receive us so as if they've known us for years. So one of my very earlier short stories that I wrote was about this hospitality of this Syrian family. And I think that was what I did and was preparing me to become who I became, the writer that I became in the Netherlands. But I think it was the war in Liberia, the constant negative news in the Western media about Liberia, because those days were the news was so negative that Liberians were actually hiding themselves. They would rather say, I'm from Ghana or Nigeria than say if they were from Liberia. Yes, that's how terrible it was. I mean, because, the news was charged soldiers and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
It's just very negative throughout. And I think that's when I truly became a writer, because that helplessness. Because how do you deal with that sense of helplessness? So, I decided to do something, and because I didn't have the power to bring about an immediate ceasefire and peace in Liberia, I began to write. Yes, so I remember it was after not even a year, few months after I arrived in the Netherlands, that I seriously began to write Land of My Fathers, my novel, the novel that became my first novel. Yes. And I was writing every day, every day. And so while people were struggling to make sense of their presence as refugees in the Netherlands, I immediately realized that writing was something that gave meaning to my life. And as long as I, remain writing and expressing my feelings, I had some kind of sanity, I could maintain some kind of sanity. And I think it did. But my brother, my elder brother with whom I went to the Netherlands, didn't have that sense of meaning. So he was, can you imagine? This is a man who was like a role model for me. I felt he could do anything. But exile, being a refugee, being, in some place with no sense of belonging, no sense of home, breaks and traumatizes some people, despite the fact that morally and spiritually he was a very strong man. But I saw my brother being reduced to someone who didn't have a sense of direction and who struggled more than I've ever seen someone struggle to belong. And he never succeeded. It's terrible. Yes, he did not succeed at all. Actually, every step he took failed. And when in Kuwait, he was like there. I speak many languages, but he spoke more languages than I did. He was more successful and everything. And this is what fleeing and being a refugee does to people.
It's like he was
Yeah.
estranged
Yes,
from who
yes,
he
yes.
could have been.
Yes, yes. And I was fortunate because it's not because I'm special. No, no, not at all. It's more. I met very remarkable people, much better human beings than I was, much stronger. But we didn't have that luck. So I do say, because people tend to say, oh, it's everything, meritocracy, it's hard work, it's this one. And I'm saying, no, 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 no. Because I've seen people who have worked harder than I ever would, and who were broken by circumstances, by war, by a sense of loss. Yes. And so sometimes luck is very, so I was lucky to have found the writing, and I was doing that every day. I wrote, because when you're that young, because I was a teenager,
Right.
when you're that young, yes, there's this naivety makes you to believe that everything is possible. But at the same time, you stumble or, sometimes you're overwhelmed by doubt, because I was actually writing about the U.S. I've never been there. The novel is a fictional, historical novel set partly in the U.S. So, and that was actually what led me to at a certain point being blocked, not going further with the writing of the novel, because I was saying like, oh, is this convincing enough? Am I good enough? I've never been to the US. Can I write this novel? And at a certain point, I stopped. And because the doubt became overwhelming and I couldn't, yes. But then I began to write some short stories. And there was one short story that I wrote that restored my courage and belief in myself. And that story is called Faces. It's published online. So it was inspired. We're talking about some years later. We're talking about now I'm a law student and in the Netherlands going to Tilburg Law School doing international law. And so every day when I went to school, I saw this tall white man, very bearded, heavily bearded, with a Bible in his hand. And he was just preaching to everyone, with this loud voice, And what I began to wonder, who is he? What is the story behind this man who is here every day? Come winter, come summer, he's just here preaching. And because writing is imagining other lives, so I imagine instead of writing about a white man, I imagine a black woman, an old, beautiful black woman who comes to this train station every day and sits, and order a drink or food. And she's just quiet, sometimes reading the newspaper, but just doing nothing, just sitting for hours. And then this black architect, a very successful black architect who goes to work, sees this black woman every day, and he's wondering, who is she? What is this beautiful black woman doing this station every day? What is her story? So one day he decides to break the spell. I'm going to talk to her. So he walks towards this black woman, and she sees him, and she stands up and rushes. He said, "Oh, my son, you've returned."
Oh.
Yes. And then he says, "Oh my, I'm not her son, but in order not to hurt her, so I'm going to play alone to see why is she calling me my son?" So this is the story of two people, two strangers finding each other, And so this is a story of a chance encounter with a white man led to me writing my first successful story, So yes, so this story and 6 other stories, then I included as a manuscript, sent a publisher. And the publisher read it in a week, and he called me and said, "Oh my God, this Faces, that's the story. And we really, really would like to know more about you. And you said in your cover letter that you're writing a novel about Liberia. So please, I would like to read that novel." So he read it during the weekend, and he called me and said, "Look, this novel is good that you're writing about Liberia. So we're going to give you." Look, I was receiving as a refugee like 20 euros a week. And now the publisher said, we're going to give you 10,000 euros.
As an advance.
As an advance. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. And this is in the 90s.
This is in the 90s, yes. We're talking about we're talking about 1998, 99, right? Mm-hmm. It changed my life. I mean, I had written half of this novel and I was blocked. And then you see, believe. Now I've met people who believed in me truly, right? So, I mean, I took up this novel and I finished it in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, yes. And it was published when I was like 24 or something.
Yeah.
And it changed everything. And yes, I became a bestseller writer in the Netherlands. I was getting fan mails. I was like... And people were inviting me to their, home cooking, dinner, everything.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, really? And it's my brother's life. I took over the expenses in the house and I was paying, everything. And I became a columnist for a national newspaper and my university newspaper. So I was a student and also, how do you call it? One of the people working, being paid by the university.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So,
So I want to understand more about, because the business of how you were able to, emerge yourself. So you were a student at the time, and so what were the channels that you used to find a publisher? Because the writers struggle with that often. And so what were the channels that you used?
yes. So, as I said, I came to the Netherlands as a refugee, and it was a long process because it took us 3 years before we were recognized. Just imagine, this was at the height of war, and yet, yes, and yet we're, because they were saying, oh, yes, and it took a while, but I was writing throughout, and so with the short stories, I had read, because I was then, I had learned Dutch, and I was reading novels by migrant writers, not necessarily African writers. There weren't African writers in the Netherlands. So there was this writer from Iran who had gained a lot of attention and very successful in the Netherlands. So I had read his first novel, and so I said, "Oh my God, this is good. That someone will come here and learn this Dutch, become successful and publish a book." So I'm going to send my manuscript to his publisher. Yes, and what the publisher said was very appealing about my cover letter was that he said many beginning writers make the mistake of really creating very impressive CV about their lives and something, but that what he found fascinating was that I confined my letter to just describing. There was something mysterious, there was not everything, something left out, out of that he was curious to know about, so yes, so that was the thing that was appealing about it. So, and that's what, made him, and the story, of course, the short stories I had written. So, and that's why he reached out. He actually called. He did not even wait to write,
Right, because we weren't really so much in email then. It was like the early days
Yes,
of
yes,
email.
yes. So, I mean, indeed, when I was going to school, the university, we had emails, but I never used email.
Right, exactly, exactly.
I was like, what is this strange thing?
It's like you had to go to the center to get on and all that stuff. Yeah.
So he called, and my brother picked it up. But I didn't tell my brother that I sent this manuscript, because I was telling myself, because failure, it gains great impact when it's in the eyes of others, right? So I was silent about this. So I said, if I fail, then it's just me. So he didn't know, he didn't know about this. So the publisher called. He said, I'm Ryan. I would like to talk to Vamba. He said, no, Vamba isn't here. He's gone to university. He'll be back around 10. So please call. So I came home. My brother said, someone called. He didn't know there was the publisher. So and Ryan called at 10 with a telephone call that changed my life, Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying that I was lucky that went so fast. But I've had some, with English speaking, for example, The Emperor's Son, it was very difficult to find a publisher, which I couldn't believe, because people who have read this book, my agent and others have really loved it so much. So I couldn't, it said the subject matter, it said, because the American publishing, publishers are not familiar with the subject, that they were very reluctant. I don't know. So it's like a miracle that a small African American publisher in the US decided, read the work and decided to publish it. So yes.
Who was that publisher?
It's Kanshi. It's a Hausa word for a rebel or something, So yes, it's I think 2-3 years old, a very young publishing house.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, my God, this is like a dream come true for me. Yes, because imagine this book I spent 5-6 years writing. Yes, and I spent 3 months, traveling through West Africa to research. I went as far as Timbuktu. Yes, that was before the jihadis took it over.
Right.
Yeah, so And I was fortunate. I was lucky.
Yeah, I was
And
going to say, like, timing is everything.
yeah,
So,
indeed.
so it was a lot of the book needed
Yeah.
to be done. And so the timing afforded you that opportunity. And so since you brought it up, tell us about the inspiration. You know, this is kind of your genres, right? It's how you write. But this particular story, how
Yes.
what was it?
It was inspired by the stories that I heard as a child. Somebody's story is well known throughout West Africa. I mean, you mentioned his name. He's regarded as a villain in northern Ghana. I mean, they mention his name over there. They say, "Oh my God, this is a horrible man," but he's a hero to many. You know, in West Africa, in Guinea, Mali, in Africa, Sierra Leone, Liberia. So depending where you go, you know, he's a hero or a villain. But so I grew up hearing his story. But what triggered the urge to pick up the pen and begin to read more about him was an interview that I read that Simbin Usman, or Usman Simbin, the father of African cinema, had given. In that interview, Simbin Usman said that he had been trying to make a movie or a series about somebody for more than 40 years. Yes, and that he's been having problem financially, especially, most importantly, financial problem, because there were very few people willing to invest in that huge project. And that the president of Senegal, Wadi, or was it Diouf, or others had promised him, and even Gaddafi promised, but they did not keep their promise, and he could not get the money from Europe, because the movie was very critical of the colonial powers of France and of England. So how do you then go to France or to England to ask for money, to make a film that is very critical of these powers? So he did not succeed. So I said, oh my God, what if I succeeded in writing a novel, fictional. Yes, a fictional account of this man. It's never been done before.
Sure.
So I began to research his life, but it was very daunting, intimidating, because there was so much about him. Then how do you capture a man that was larger than life in many ways? How do you capture such a life, in a novel, in like a few hundred pages? It was very challenging. I mean, I tried and failed, until I came across a piece of history that was like a key to what I was trying to do. And that was that Samori's mother traced her origin to the people in the forests of Liberia. So you see now the connection I've been looking for. Somebody was born in the savannah. I'm from the forest. So I said, yes, this is the link that I wanted. So that's why I introduced a boy from the war of his mother, who leaves the forest and goes to the savannah, who inevitably meets this emperor, and the emperor recognizes his mother, or the people of his mother, in him, and decides to adopt him. So he is the emperor's son. So that was the key to write. Yes. And that's what novel writing is, right? You're trying things, and then all of a sudden, you have this breakthrough, you have this insight, and that's usually the key. Then you follow it, and it takes you to where you want to go. Every novel I've ever written has that. This element of surprise or mystery or insight, and say, yes, this is how I'm supposed to do this,
Yeah.
And
it makes it fun.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
But before you arrive at that, that insight, it takes it out of
Torturous.
So it took a while. Yes.
Yeah.
So coming back to this sense of locality, I many times I feel at home in Holland, among my books and my life in Northern Holland. I'm a Northerner all my life. Born in the north of Liberia, living in the north of Holland. So
where exactly?
Groningen.
Groningen,
yes. It's a university city with 80,000. So it's yes, but it's been because yes, sometimes exile, I think it was Nabokov who said that exile can be a blessing or a curse,
Yeah.
and sometimes the curse is this sense of not belonging, this sense that, exile is, reminds you, and not always, not every day, but sometimes in a, sharply that you don't belong there, you know, with sometimes discrimination, racism, which is everywhere in the West, yeah, yeah. So, you're reminded, oh no, I'm from somewhere in Liberia, and yes, and then you say, all right, let me go back to Liberia, and I don't know how it was for you, when you came to Ghana, when you decided to return, and the challenges, but sometimes, you decide to return, and this like a sense of euphoria for a week or two, and begins to gradually, evaporate, and then you're confronted with the reality. And if you're not very strong, even though you were born in this place in Africa, the challenges are sometimes very huge. That's the struggle we constantly go through. Where do we belong? Where?
Yeah. And I that you mentioned that because I've been thinking a lot about that idea of feeling like an outsider, right? Because I think that do I belong or do I not belong? Because we that have traveled and come back are this different species. We have sensibilities that are of a certain level, and then we come back, and then that integration is that challenge. So it is, like you said, are you strong enough to be who you are and still be of amongst, or
Yes, and it is very, very challenging. And I mean, I know people who decided to make that move and failed, and after a while they're forced to, and yes, and some who decide to, go on despite everything. And I haven't arrived at that point because it took a while in the Netherlands before I began to have this sense of belonging or home. And when I can't just then up and
right? Yeah, you're riding that that stability.
indeed, so and but it's been a remarkable life, because going to a place, a strange place, and finding your voice and being appreciated by the people. I mean, the majority of the Dutch appreciate what I do.
Yeah.
But there are people who have attacked me vehemently. Yeah, oh yes, very, very terrible racist trollers and Twitter and everything. Who, yes, every time an opportunity opens up, for me, just see people. For example, this anthology that I curated, Black. Oh my God, it was vehemently, where I was called the woke cane.
Wow.
Oh yes.
Wow.
you know,
How
I
that
said,
was been
what did they mean by that?
right,
This is what
exactly. Yeah. And that the concept that woke has transcended American culture.
Oh yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah,
Right?
it is.
Yeah.
So I was going. I said, what did they mean by that?
It's all right. I'm sure it's a beautiful, beautiful anthology. And I want to come back to that. But before that, we've landed, you're local. So let's talk about local speak. So please share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience.
Yes.
And how or why you value it as local speak.
A word. I mean, I could use. We're talking about a Dutch word like lekker, which is delicious. I think that's a word that I found myself using, especially because I love cooking and I love to surprise myself all the time with experimenting. So I check this cookbook, and fortunately you can see everything is on the internet. So I want to try something, and I cook it, and it is so delicious. I remember I was telling my students, I think 2 weeks ago, I tried this peanut, it's a peanut or groundnut soup. We call it peanut butter sauce or something. It is very unique to, I don't know whether they have it in Ghana, but it's very, all right. So that, and it was so good. I was like, wow, this is really lekker, like the Dutch say, you know, and I was describing it to my students, and they were writing it down.
And you're going to make it for us.
You know.
Yeah.
So yes, yes, and sometimes it's very funny. For a while, for like 2-3 years, I've been calling myself cosmopolitan. I don't know. And yesterday I was teaching Kwame Altine Appiah's book, you know, cosmopolitanism, you know,
Yeah.
this sense of, you know, belonging to the universe. And, you know, so sometimes I tend to see myself like that. And someone interviewed me. It was an American magazine, a literary magazine, and in which I said, in literature, I feel at home. I truly do. You know, I read novels. It's like, really, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I mean, sometimes I'm even jealous that someone else wrote that sentence or captured the word in such a way, you know? It's really beautiful.
Yeah. That's neat.
Yeah.
So speaking of cosmopolitan, I just have to ask, I'm so curious, the hat. It's
Yes.
like your signature.
Yes, it is. It is.
Tell us the story.
It has its root in my very beginning. I come from a people who wore, you know, headgears. You know, women always had scarves or head ties, and the men had something on. You know, so I remember there's a picture of my father a year before he passed on. He passed on. Me and my he commissioned this picture especially.
Yeah.
Yes. And a year later he passed. So I'm standing on the right of my father, and I had this French beret, you know, on. So that's the only picture I have of the two of us. And so I've always worn something on my head, but for years, in Kuwait, I never had hats or caps, anything on. And in the Netherlands, it took me years, but everything changed when I was invited. I'm already a published writer, my first novel. So I was invited to Brussels for a reading. And then I was there. There was a festival. I was there for a week. And I was walking around, and I entered this shop, you know. It was owned by an old man. He's in the 70s, yes, 70s. He's still alive. He's in the 90s now.
Yeah.
So yes, he goes to work every day. So, and I saw these beautiful caps and hats. Oh my God. You know, so I just tried, you know, on a whim, you know, it's just spontaneous. and I look in the mirror and I said, yes, this is it. This is, you know, how I want to look. That was the beginning.
Okay.
Yes. So I think shortly after the publication of my first novel, that's when I began. And now I have like more than a dozen.
I'm sure.
Different.
Yeah.
Yes. And also caps, you know, I do. And from that shop, I still have, because they are so very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
The craftsmanship.
So like this Gatsby, great Gatsby caps I have, you know. Yeah, I'll show you one on my Insta.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So you started to move into this direction, and the theme that I have been tackling in my experience for Pa Gya this year is activism.
Mm-hmm.
And so with every writer that I'm speaking with, I'm very curious about, because you called yourself an activist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Definitely an activist. Yeah. And so when you think about how you communicate that in your work, because novels are not necessarily thought of as activist content, right? And so, and also as an educator, as a teacher, how do you stream that in to your epic?
Yes. So my activism is not confined only to the novels that I write and that I try to correct injustices in history, slavery and colonialism and that. The Emperor's Son, for example, is about the greatest African resistance fighter to colonialism, Samori Touré. That's part of my activism. But for example, Black is kind of carrion call. I mean, there was no book like that in the Netherlands. You know, we wanted to give voice to people with a lot of talent, with no, you know, they were not giving attention. They had a podium.
Yeah.
You know, so we said, no. I mean, let's bring about a change in that. Let's go in search of people who we know have talents, you know, but are not popular at all. So and we're very all the newspapers, television, just a lot of attention this anthology created in the Netherlands, So yes, so that's my activism. And I'm always writing essays. For example, this blackface thing in the Netherlands, this terrible tradition of, painting themselves black, and then going about, it's horrible. I have written, against it many, many times. So that's how my activism expresses itself. Because a writer has an obligation, to yourself and to society to write against injustice. That's our story, trying to bring about change. So my writing, I'm not writing just, like some people say, all right, I'm doing it just to earn some money. No, no, no. Writing to me is a responsible vocation. I write to bring about change, to educate. So that's what I do. And in Holland, I mean, I'm so fortunate. All right, all right. For example, one of my anthologies, The Comet. The Comet was inspired by Du Bois' short story, The Comet, of the same name, about this black-white relationship. That Du Bois 100 years ago was difficult to imagine. Black and white sitting and just talking without someone, the black person being attacked and things. So then I ask myself, I mean, 100 years later, I curated writers to try to respond to that story. How is your experience with, being a black person or even a white person,
Sure.
in
Yeah.
relationship to the other, to a black person, and the black person to the other, a white person. So that was one of my anthologies, and that resulted in people really reflecting on, their presence in the West, and white people who have interacted with black people and how that interaction have been, So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For example, I teach creative writing sometimes, and because I teach third year, and it's not always every year that there are third year students. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So three of my students, one of them told me very honestly, very openly, that it was very extraordinary that this was the first time having a black instructor, and that he wanted to write, to reflect on that in an essay. Being taught, yes, because I mean he's a filmmaker, a very successful man, white man. So he was saying, I've never had this experience before. So he was asking my permission. Can I write this? I said, go on, do it. I would like to read.
Yeah.
How your experience has been. A very
Creating that honest dialogue and reflection,
yes,
and
yes.
that moves the dial forward, essentially.
So he and I was, for example, I was in South Africa. I think it was my second time. Yes, it was. And we, international group of writers. There were writers from Malaysia, writers from Poland, and was it the US? I don't know. But a group of writers were in this bus traveling through South Africa. And we came to this town, and we were asked to give workshops to a group of students. And what I didn't know was that one of the students, this white boy, was very reluctant to attend my workshop. His parents have been talking to him for weeks. Yes. And finally, he was able to do it. And it's an eye-opening experience for him, because he's never experienced black people, a black man teaching him, telling him about things
That he doesn't know about.
you know,
Wow. Uh-huh.
do you know that after that session, this boy not only was very, very open and very accepting and very welcoming to my contribution, but he actually got in touch with me.
Oh.
Yes, he emailed me and confessed his reluctance. Yes, and became, for a long time, we communicated to and fro.
Wow.
Yes. So it's so
Things
strange.
you don't think about. Yeah. I mean, it's the other side, right? Because we're so used to learning from others, right? So it was rare for me growing up to have a black teacher, right? And so for those tables to be turned, it's a whole other situation. And that's definitely a European experience, more so than maybe in other parts of the world. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and And of course, the the negative experiences. I mean, I was a 25-year-old boy, just published his first novel, been celebrated. So you have this ball, this book ball is one of the most prestigious. All writers and publishers want to be there. And so I was invited along with my brother. So, and I was just going through, a sea of white people. And yes, definitely, literally.
Right.
So I met this man who he came up to me. He said, "Oh, are you that actor? Is he not in that movie? You know, about that footballer, that South African footballer. This is a book ball, right? A ball of writers." And then a white man is seeing a black man there. And so the only thing he's thinking, I'm either an actor or musician or something. Yes.
Right.
It's strange. It's like, this is what the racism and discrimination is. Prove yourself first wrong. Say, oh, you're a writer or something, or what, when I say then, no, I'm not, then, but you just assume that I couldn't be a writer, and yeah. These are some of the things that we
Right. Experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Privilege is an interesting mindset. And so that brings me to my mindset hack. So how do you hack your mindset? Is there something specific you do?
I think my optimism helps. My upbringing, yes, my optimism, yes. I truly, they are better people. They are, despite the terrible experiences sometimes you have. Yes, because it's funny. I mean, you meet someone, you say hello in the West, and they just look the other way. But just like 5 minutes later, you meet someone who will smile to you. And so my upbringing to be positive and to seek the good in humanity,
Yeah.
has kept me grounded. If you react to every negative experience, I mean, it drives you crazy.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest tool that I've had to recruit in being here, because just driving on the road, there's just so many common everyday frustrations that just like, why?
Yeah.
But if I reacted to them, I would just be miserable.
Oh, yes.
And so it is.
You'll be so very, 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 miserable. And I tell myself, I come from a very, unique culture, this African culture, this culture of smiles and laughter, and I believe in humanity. Look what we're giving to humanity. So we're giving so much. What's it I do was saying? He said, we're giving the all, yes, they taking.
Yes.
And yes, we've always, at every turn of historical events, Africans and Black people have always shown the best in humanity, and I don't know, perhaps humanity needs us to survive.
That's true.
Yes.
I would agree with that 100%.
If not, that would be the end of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's I would argue that there's a reason why civilization is rooted here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if you just look what has been perpetuated on us. I mean, it's the crime is it's indescribable.
Yeah. I know you brought, by mentioning Ma'at, I have a sort of question I'm asking all of the writers from the festival, which is, what is your essential, what are some titles on your essential Pan-African activist reading list?
Oh, the book I recommend every time, I was even talking about it last week with my students, is the great masterpiece of world literature, No, I'm not even defining it. I'm not saying African or whatever. The great masterpiece of literature, The Radiance of the King, by Kamara Lai, or Lai Kamara. Oh my God. I mean, it's one of the most brilliant work of literature I've ever read in any language, in any culture, in any time in history. Yes. It's
Okay.
It's and this is my recommendation. You can find this online. Toni Morrison's introduction She wrote a review of that novel.
Ah.
You read that, I mean, Florence, you got to say, wow, 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 wow. You know, even the introduction or the review is a masterpiece in itself.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she's a prolific writer, so her message.
Yes,
Sure.
yes, yes.
Okay, I love that. That's one that I haven't heard.
Yeah.
So
Oh my
we'll.
God. I
That's
mean, yes.
this list is going to be in the show notes, folks. So be sure to check that out.
Go today if you get home. Just Google the introduction. On the Radiance of the King by Toni Morrison.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So beautiful, so beautiful. I mean, I read it because I do book reviews, and I read it. It was so beautiful. I was jealous. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
This is how I have to express myself. It was like it's so beautifully done.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's that spirit of Pan-Africanism. It shines through her work. That introduction, you see how she understands what it means to be Black and African in the world. It's so brilliantly captured in that introduction. Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that one. So speaking of, I like to also ask, who are you when you're not reading or writing
Yes.
or teaching?
Yes.
And so I like to ask if you're a reader, a watcher, or listener. This is so irrelevant for writers because they all write. But what are some of your favorites, and what else do you do in your leisure time?
I love movies. Like I can watch movies for hours, and it's not and my taste is very broad. I mean, Indian, Korean, African, Nigerian, Ghanaian, everything.
Yeah.
So that's what I do to cooking. I can spend hours.
Yeah.
I can spend hours in the kitchen. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's really, I take my time. I'm not in a haste, and just very slowly, pause to like cut the onions and everything. So yeah,
It's
I
masterpiece.
love, yes. And if I love a book, if a book is very, very good, I know a book is very good if I read a sentence or a paragraph that really just like a lightning bolt, something like that. Wow. I stop it, Yeah. I don't read on. I want to digest. I want to savor. Yes.
Marinated in your mind.
Yes. And sometimes I'm still, hesitant. Like I wait until, 2 days or 3 days, and then I pick up that book. I read something else, something simpler, something easier, something,
Yeah.
yes, with less quality, so that. Because I'm telling myself, if I read on, it's done like in a week, and then it will take me weeks again to get something so special. This is why I read so slowly. Or sometimes I begin from the very beginning.
Sure.
I reach to that point
until you go
again.
back
Yeah, go back again. Yeah. That's how I do it,
Interesting. Yeah. So I'm curious about, just before I know our time is moving, I'm curious about writing, the languages you choose to write in. So do you only write in English?
I write in Dutch. My Dutch is very good. So I write both in Dutch and in English. I'm actually writing an essay now on little moments of happiness or something. Yes, in Dutch, yes. So, and roughly, was it yesterday or I just sat down over there, and just the first thing that came into my mind was me standing, seeing myself at the airport in Liberia, or even in Accra, and that African sound around me, Oh my God, that chorus of, voices affirming, my being. It's so unique. This is for me, the ultimate, it's not a big happiness, but just, I want to start my article with that. Just, yes, that sense of home, it's, you can't find it in the West. No, it is, even though I speak my Liberian English sometimes in Holland, but that awareness, it's just all around you. It's beautiful. Yeah. So that's it. for me.
So before we sign off, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yes, I wanted to say that I'm grateful for the invitation to be part of Pa Gya. I really enjoyed it. Great conversations, meeting people that I admire, that I appreciate as fellow writers, and meeting new people, having great conversations. I think what I love about festivals is not even the themes discussed on podiums, but the conversation that I have,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I find that too. It's just so much I like the setting. The thing about Pa Gya is you have all the rooms, but then you have the courtyard and you have the restaurant. And that is where all the conversations are, just kind of building for having them.
You, for example, I bought some beautiful rings.
Yeah.
And because I saw a fellow writer who had this, and I asked, "Oh, where do you get them?" No, I know someone who sells them here. So, and a day later, I had all these beautiful rings. So great.
The beauty of connection.
Yeah.
Mama, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much. I wish you great success with your latest project.
Thank you.
And those upcoming. And savor Accra for the sun of it in the last few days before you head back north.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, Glocal citizens, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcast. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe. Leave us a review. Leave us a review. Leave us a review. Yes, you can leave up to a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, thumbs up on YouTube. You get the picture. And be sure to check the show notes. You can get a link to my activism panel at the Pa Gya Festival, as well as always to connect with Vamba and his work. So until next time, bye for now.